Hi everybody, it's Steve Burton and myself, Alison Iredale here. We thought we would talk you through the professional values and practice assignment. It's always one of those problems of how much detail you put in an assignment and how much we leave it to your own sort of interpretation. But because there are so many of you and you all work in different settings, have different sets of experiences, we just thought we would do a little wrap up really of the kind of things that we thought the assignment is worth pointing out in the assignment. So we're going to talk through the assignment in the sections, and then we've got one or two examples to show you about how previous students have approached the work. So over to you, Steve, if you want to just take us through the first bits.
Okay, thanks Alison. You can see from the screen in front of you that we're on My Beckett. We're in the PVP module and we're actually on the assignment section, and I'm sure you're all very familiar with this already. As you know, the assignment for this PVP module consists of 4 different sections, and as we've just said, myself and Alison will talk you through. The first part is the pen portrait. Now, a lot of you will have already submitted as part of your induction a pen portrait. It's important that if you've had feedback on that work, that you respond to that feedback. Quite often when you put in an initial pen portrait, you talk about yourself, you talk about your experiences and what's led you to be a teacher, and that's exactly what we are looking for. But at this point in time, when you're actually submitting, you need to bear in mind that you're submitting at level 7. That's master's level work. So we are expecting you to see reference in this section. We're expecting to see you link into theory. And think about the theories that you've studied as part of the module. Think about where you've investigated areas of professionalism and professional practice and what makes professionalism. This is the kind of thing that we're expecting to see in this section. Before we get going, we should tell you that again that we have this reflective report template. Now, you don't have to use this by any stretch of the imagination, but it has been designed specifically to help you structure this assignment. So if you work your way through it, providing you're writing at the right level, you're not going to be far off. You're certainly not going to be missing things out. No. We've opened it up for you here. It's simply a Word document that you can make your way through. As we're talking about these different sections, it's been set up so that you've got a contents page that will update itself if you use these subheadings and headings. You do this by, once you've actually completed your assignment, make sure that you've used all your headings, and then right button click over here and update field, and you're going to update page numbers only, or if you've added any extra sections, update the entire table. Click OK, and this will automatically update your page numbering in your contents page. So we really can't stress enough that this has been provided as an assistance for you, but you don't have to use it. Close it.
Yeah, don't forget to take away all the red text.
yeah, we don't want to read that again. Okay. So back to the module. You're going to talk in this section about where your practice is occurring, the context of your practice, the age group that you're teaching. Does the age group or your particular class have any special features, anything that will really add a flavour to the story that you're going to tell us? So sell your setting, sell your school, sell your context of practice to us. It's important that when we're marking, we get a flavour of the environment that you're working in, because you're all working in such different areas. It's difficult for us sometimes to keep track of the kind of things that we should be looking out for in your work, because someone working in a reception class with 5-year-olds is going to have very different experiences to someone working in year 11 in a high school or secondary school. Should also mention that wherever possible, you should relate back to the teacher's standards if you're working in the United Kingdom. This is something that you will be used to from your professional practice if you work in the UK. If you're working to other standards elsewhere in the world, then again, this adds flavour to your professionalism if you can discuss these issues as part of your course, but link them back to your professional practice.
Yes, and already in the pen portraits, in the introductory assignments, we're seeing how people's previous experience really informs the way that they think of themselves as a teacher. So that can be developed. We have people who've got experience being a coach in some sport, whether that's football or netball or something, and then or working with in the Brownies or the Scouts movement, and then they start to find their way into teaching, but they take some of that ethos and that professionalism through their previous experience into this current experience. And I think that really provides a richness to your understanding, knowledge of professionalism, but also how you embody those professional values in your own practice. And that comes through sometimes by getting involved in after-school clubs, extracurricular activities, and getting involved with the life of the school more generally, not just in the subject area or in the phase. And
that is 750 words, which I reckon we've just said more than.
Yes,
it's not a big section, so and please do stick to your word counts wherever you can. Part 2 then is the policy analysis. This is more straightforward than it looks, I think. Do you agree with that, Alison?
Yes, we've revised it 2 or 3 times actually from the previous cohorts, and it's always quite tricky to explain to again a very diverse body of students exactly what we mean, because curriculum planning documents can mean different things to different people. So we've put an example of a scheme of work, which most people do use the phrase scheme of work, but it's something that might take a topic or a theme, and then you'll develop that over a period of weeks. And what's important here, I think, is that a curriculum, any planning document doesn't sit on its own. It's not sort of just floating free. It's informed by several documents, several sort of higher level documents, and we just call those documents policy documents, and they could be derived from a range of sources. They could be a fixed, codified, firm document that the school has produced, maybe that the government has produced, such as the national curriculum in the UK, certainly in England, or it could be a departmental policy that's a little bit maybe slightly looser. And we're really leaving that up to you, but it's something that a group of people have sat down and said this is how a whole group or a whole department, a whole school needs to think about the way that it carries out certain practices. And what we ought to see with a good policy is that whatever is said in that policy or written in that policy then feeds through into the planning documents, and even further from that into the lived experience of the pupils as they're going through their topic. And of course you might guess that doesn't always happen.
Absolutely.
Sometimes it's very, very well aligned, sometimes it's not so well aligned, and that means that's really important to pick up on. It's a little bit like snagging a building when you're trying to build a building and get it ready to sell. That later on you find, perhaps we should have put the plug points in a different place, or lots of things sort of come to mind afterwards. And it's important that any group of people, particularly professionals, look from 2 perspectives, from the policy downwards and how that feeds into what's intended and what's experienced, but then also back upwards again. How can the separate practice inform a reworking of the policy? And all we want you to do, it sounds very straightforward, is to highlight that, to illuminate where we've got documents that are very well aligned, and maybe where there might be practices that differ from what the policy intended, and also vice versa. And then possibly some, some reflection on the impact of that on children's learning, on the way that the school runs, the smooth running of the curriculum, and then what you might want to do about it.
We can give you some tips as well. I think that probably the first tip that we should stress is in part 3 you're going to go on to talk about behaviour management. So it's sensible for you to avoid the behaviour policy in part 2, isn't it? because you are going to run out, you're literally going to run out of things to say. So have a look at your planning documentation, have a look at your schemes of work. You might call them medium-term plans, you might call them long-term plans, but anything that extends over a period of time where you are expected to chart out outcomes for your children or your students, methods of study, show what your pedagogical decisions are, and think, well, what kind of policies in the school link to those kinds of decisions. So for instance, it may well be that you have to, on your scheme of work or your long-term plans, think about inclusion, and you might have to be very, very specific on your schemes of work or long-term plans about how you include all students or all children in your teaching. In that case, it may well make sense for you to compare your scheme of work as your planning document and your school or settings inclusion policy.
Mm-hmm.
That would work really, really well. It may be that your scheme of work or long-term or medium-term plans include a lot of information about assessment and how children or students will be assessed over the course of that scheme of work. In that case, it could be really, really useful for you to actually look at that scheme of work or long-term plan and compare it against your school or settings assessment policy. You know, do the two things sit hand in hand? Do they work together beautifully? Are there areas where, when you look at the assessment policy, for instance, and it may well talk about the rich breadth of assessment that your school or setting promotes, is that actually reflected in the scheme of work that you're using? You know, so there are real interesting opportunities for you to have a look at some good stuff there. Just anecdotally, myself and Alison have been teaching for quite some time, and in the UK, about 15 years ago, we had a policy called Every Child Matters.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a perfect example of something that we all had to, it was a national policy, it came from the Children Act, and we all had to incorporate that policy into our lesson plans, our schemes of work, our module handbooks, everything, didn't we?
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing that we're wanting to get you thinking about. Does your planning documentation, your schemes of work, your long-term plans fit hand in glove with your policy in school?
We've got some examples of other people from last year, if you want to pull those up, and we'll have just a quick look at them.
Yeah.
So we've got several of them. So this one, I'll just give you a little bit of a chance to read it. So I'll just to ease movement forward, I think you can go back to this because you'll be able to go back to it on the video, but I think you can see here, this is one student who's, this is a section of the assignment, this is where she talks about the policy analysis. So she's looking at a particular scheme of work, just happens to be on history, on the Stuarts, and then she's found the teaching and learning policy, and talking about how progress is made and the active learning, etc. But if you notice a little bit further down, I'm just trying to spot it myself here, students needed to identify cures and preventions of disease, and she's spotting something very, very particular of how the teaching and learning policy aligns with the planning document. In terms of social interaction, so presumably she's bringing up the point that the students are allowed to share their ideas with the peers and have some cooperation in their learning. And then she's sort of bringing an argument together that means that the teaching and learning policy is well aligned to the particular planning document. And maybe she might go on to actually highlight a particular issue that could be addressed going forward. In this section, I haven't picked that bit up, but I think you can see how she's set the scene and then focused on something specific and then pulled the two together and said how one aligns with the other. We've got another one that shows an introduction to the whole assignment actually, but just introduces the policy analysis as well. And this one, I think the reason why I've picked this one out is because I think it's a particularly good introduction anyway. We often find in introductions that students don't often give us a really clear structure, a signal about what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. They might repeat what the learning outcomes or what the assignment is asking them to do, but they then don't make it specific. So they might say, I'm going to look at policies. So you can see here that that this student has particularly said it's not just a policy, it's a school marking policy. And how it correlates with research into, again, a specific aspect, which is, in her case, assessment for learning. So she's comparing that with a scheme of work. So I'm hoping that you can see here that she's making it specific and relevant to her context, not just sort of a broad introduction. So there's just two examples there, one a broad introduction and one an actual introduction to the section that might give you an idea of how to develop your own way of addressing that section.
Okay, and that's 1,000 words, and again I reckon we've said more than 1,000 words there
Yeah.
on it. It's not a giant piece of work, so choosing that appropriate scheme of work or long-term plan and choosing the right policy, if you get that right, and I think by listening to this advice you will get it right, that'll really help you to flow through that.
Yeah, just another point on that. In the Google Plus communities, people are already picking up on themes and aspects of teaching that they're finding really, really interesting and they're wanting to take forward. It might seem as if, well, it's too much to grasp, but there's some real efficiency gains that can be picked up from the communities, people looking again at extracurricular, people looking at progress and attainment. So if you can see that somebody's interested in the same sort of thing as you, then talk to each other, get some idea of maybe a shared set of literature that will help you both to be able to address the assignment. Contrary to popular belief, that's not classed as plagiarism. We are allowed to talk to each other. It's what people do in normal life, and we share and collaborate in order to build a better outcome. But your individual assignment will be very, very different to your peers. It's just that you're sharing the body of literature and making some efficiency gains on that side.
Part 3 then, everyone. Again, this is another 1,000 word section. It says here, as you can see, more instructions on creating and sharing your presentations will follow shortly. They've already followed, so if we just scroll up and go back to announcements, here we go. You can see that Catherine has put on a link through to a video just like this one, which takes you through the actual mechanics of preparing the assignment and sharing it. So that's already been done for you. Okay, so please do follow this link in order to get that piece of video. So back to the assignment. Don't you love it when it works flawlessly like this? Not at all, Blue Peter.
Don't
Okay.
speak too soon.
Exactly. So this is where you do get a chance to talk about behaviour and behaviour management. It's quite a nice way of looking at it. I think this. What we're wanting you to do is observe some other teachers doing their job, go into their classes, obviously with their permission, and take notes about how a teacher more experienced than you. Now that's quite easy to do if you're new to teaching. It could actually be very interesting if you're a really experienced teacher. Do you have student teachers or recently qualified teachers in your school or setting? In which case you could do this section by observing someone that's far less experienced than you. So that's an interesting way to look at it. But basically, we'd like you to observe a small number of sessions, 2, 3 or 4, and take some field notes while you're in there. and look at the way that behaviour is being managed, whether that is explicitly through the way that the teacher is challenging behaviour or promoting good behaviour, or something like that, or is it implicitly? Is it perhaps more about the way that that teacher has organised the furniture, or the timings of the activities that have been designed in such a way that children are not going to get bored, for instance? So have a think about those notions.
I think there's just a point on that, just to interject. If you're a trainee teacher, you'll be doing this anyway, so don't do more than you need to. You'll be observing teachers as part of your QTS programme. So we don't want you to do anything on top. It's just that you'll be using the same reflections to then inform this particular part. I think that's important to say.
Yeah, it's a good point there, yeah. And then think about a theoretical perspective. Now you've been looking at theoretical perspectives as part of this module. So go back to the notes that you've taken, go back to the topics that you've worked through, and think about which theoretical perspectives you can use. What have you observed in those classes? Now think about this. You can't sit and listen to this video and think, right, I'm going to go and observe Freddie, and I'm going to look for examples of zones of proximal development. It doesn't work like that. You've got to go and observe Freddie, take it in, think about it, reflect on it, and then work out what that theoretical perspective is. What did Freddie use in that class? Was it behaviourist thinking around reward, around promoting positive behaviour by making compliments and that kind of thing? Was it something perhaps more constructivist like Vygotsky and scaffolding? You can't answer that question until you've gone into the classes and observed. So if you're sitting here listening to the video thinking, I don't know what I'm going to see, that's right, you don't know what you're going to see. You can't get to point 3 without doing point 2 first. And then we would like you to reflect on those professional values that you see in class, particularly around behaviour management. So what kind of values did you see being promoted by Freddie, for instance, in the classes that you observed? Have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think also you'll have maybe a whole school policy on behaviour. Sometimes they're not explicitly called behaviour policies, but there'll be how things are done around here. The norms of just how children move about, how they go from one class to the next, how they settle into the class, the way that the teacher greets them at the door. There's all sorts of hidden or sort of implicit ways that behaviour is managed. And they speak to the professional values that are promoted by the school ethos. So you, again, once you've done your observation and you've had a look at your theoretical perspectives, you can then reflect on, how well your own understanding of professional values, which might be quite recent if you've only recently come into teaching, or might be quite long held. It gives you a chance to just think back and say, how does that teacher manage behaviour? How is that different than the way that I manage behaviour? How is it different or similar to the way that the school promotes the ethos of children moving about in a safe and respectful and positive way? And there's lots of contentious issues here which you may want to bring forward, but this is not about having a rant or a criticism. It's really just having some targeted reflection on what the implications are for the values that we're promoting. How does it fit with the teacher's standards, and then how you might go forward in terms of your own learning and development.
This part you're actually presenting via a short PowerPoint presentation. You can use other presentation software if you wish, but this is not a written section. So I think it's important for you to understand that in this part, when it says equivalent to 1,000 words, we're not expecting to see 1,000 words. We are certainly not expecting to see 1,000 words. What we're saying is, if you create a 5-minute presentation that addresses these things, that in itself, alongside giving feedback to to a couple of your peers, that is equivalent to 1,000 words in terms of effort, not necessarily in terms of actual wordage. So please, for this section, think about the 5-minute length of your presentation far more than this notion of 1,000 words. As we've already said, Catherine's prepared a really nice video about the mechanics of creating and sharing the presentation, but I think we just finished this section by saying that there is a template available to you. There's just a couple of slides on there, and if you follow the template, discuss parts 1 to 4 as part of that template, then again you're not going to be far from the mark, are you?
And just one last thing, if you again back to being training teachers, you'll be wanting to find evidence to put into your QTS file, and when we give you feedback, we're going to be putting some little quick marks in that say, you know, this works very well for Teacher Standards 8, for example. So which that one will do because it talks about professional values. So use that case study, use the evidence, so that again you don't have to be finding lots of more evidence for your QTS file. You've got a piece of evidence there that should work more or less seamlessly, I would suggest, because that's how we've tried to make it work. Or discuss it with your school-based mentor or your QTS programme leader if you want to make sure that the evidence is going to be sufficient for your QTS file as well. Of course, that doesn't apply to people who are experienced teachers who are not doing it as part of alongside a QTS, but you may have some CPD portfolio that you need to put together, and again I would suggest that would make really good evidence towards a CPD portfolio.
And I think as well it's just worth making it very, very clear that you're going to take screenshots of your presentation and screenshots of the support that you've given via the feedback form to other people's presentations, and you'll include those as appendices in your reflective report. So you're not creating extra work here. It's quite simply a bolt-on for the purposes of the report. Okay, and finally, part 4.
The fun bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to take this bit?
Yeah, and you know that if you've read and listened to the spiel in the introductory assignment and looked at the course and got a feel for the course, it is based around the community is the curriculum, and we try to go as far as possible to make sure that we're not just treating you like a blank slate and then adding lots of theory and principles and pedagogy on top. We really want the course to be part of your development and for you to be able to collaborate with other people on the course. So the Google Plus community is really quite integral to that. You being able to share resources and be able to communicate your thoughts and your ideas with a group of people who are similar to you really feeds into Teacher Standards 8, which is a really explicit piece of evidence. So already I'm seeing people doing this, and we've got some maths teachers who are sharing specific maths sites for people. Some of you I know are part of professional organisations that say a geography association, and you're able to then pull down resources that might speak to a geography curriculum, for example. You know, sharing and caring is important. It's not a fluffy thing, but the notion of being able to contribute to an online discussion about your topic is a professional imperative. So I've said, I think, I'm just trying to squint down to the bottom there, that we're not forcing you into Google Plus, it's just that that's the one that fits with the course. So you can, if you like, if you already have existing social media that you use on a regular basis, so that could be the TESS resources site, which is invaluable really for picking up last minute lesson plans.
That's true.
Yes, tell no one. There's all sorts of ways that you could be sharing. You don't have to do it through Google Plus, but obviously we want everyone to benefit from your ideas. So as much as possible, if you can get involved in that community, that and through your subgroup and the main community, that would be great. And again, just with the last one there, everybody has to have evidence, so we have to know that that's taken place. It would take us days to be able to actually go and find it. So just you taking some screenshots and dropping them into your appendix, into your appendices would just allow us to know that you've actually done that. So it's light, it's 250 words. Again, that's equivalence, so it's, you know, it's not then you need a conclusion. I'm getting myself confused here. So the whole thing is 750 words equivalent, and then just wrapping it up in terms of a conclusion. So I think that's about it. Submitted via Turnitin, which most of you have had a go at submitting an assignment through Turnitin, just in the introductory assignment, but we've got the link down there for you to do that. Anything that you're not sure about, ask Steve.
Yeah, absolutely. Email through. No problem at all, as you have been doing already. Well done.
And ask the questions through Google Plus community, or make a suggestion. If you really think, oh, actually this doesn't quite work for me, send us a suggestion. Can I do it this way? And I'm sure that we're not going to be difficult about it. We want to know that it's got meaning to you beyond the assignment and moving forward into your practice and your journey as a teacher. So thanks very much for listening.
Nice to speak to you guys. Hope you're having a good week.
Yes, we certainly are, towards the end of the week.
Yeah.
And speak to you soon.
See ya.